The message came on a cold Tuesday morning in December. Commander Lisa Grant was drinking her third cup of coffee when the alarm started blaring through the Nevada Deep Space Monitoring Station. She spilled the coffee on her uniform as she ran to the main console, but she did not care. The readings on her screen made her forget everything else. Something was transmitting from beyond the solar system. Something intelligent. Lisa's hands were shaking as she worked to decode the signal. It took her team for hours to break through the alien encryption, and when they finally read the message, nobody spoke for a very long time. It was a summons. The Galactic Council, a governing body that humanity had never heard of, was demanding that Earth send representatives to a place called Nexus Prime. The message made it clear that this was not a request. It was an order. Admiral Kevin Morris received the news while eating dinner with his wife in their small apartment in Washington. His phone buzzed. He read the message, and the color drained from his face. He kissed his wife goodbye without explaining anything and drove to the Pentagon in the middle of the night. By morning, every world leader knew the truth. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and the neighbors wanted to talk. The next 18 months were chaos. Governments argued about who should represent Earth. Scientists worked day and night to understand the coordinates the aliens had provided. Religious leaders struggled to explain what this meant for their faiths. Regular people went to work and tried to pretend their entire understanding of reality had not just been destroyed. Admiral Kevin Morris was put in charge of the military response. Though nobody was sure what that meant. How do you prepare to fight enemies you have never seen, using technology you cannot understand? Kevin did not know, but he started building anyway. Quietly, secretly. Just in case, the diplomatic mission was led by Ambassador Daniel Cruz, a 62-year-old man who had spent his entire career talking people out of killing each other. He had negotiated with terrorists, dictators, and madmen. Now he would negotiate with aliens. Daniel chose his team carefully. Dr. Hannah Webb, the world's leading expert in languages and communication, would help him understand the aliens. For security officers would protect them, though everyone knew the protection was mostly symbolic. If the aliens wanted them dead, there was nothing for humans with guns could do about it. The ship they traveled in was called the Horizon. It was the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built, and it looked like a toy compared to the alien craft that had visited Earth the year before. Daniel tried not to think about that as the Horizon entered the warp gate and reality twisted around them. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of silence, of worry, of wondering what waited for them on the other side. Daniel spent most of the time reading everything humanity had learned about the Galactic Council, which was almost nothing. They knew the Council controlled most of the known galaxy. They knew it had existed for thousands of years. They knew it was made up of dozens of different species. They knew nothing about what the Council wanted from Earth. When the Horizon emerged from warp space, Lieutenant Amy Shaw was the first to see Nexus Prime. She gasped loud enough that everyone on the bridge heard her. The station was enormous. It was a massive wheel spinning slowly in the darkness of space, covered in lights that made it look like a city floating among the stars. Hundreds of ships orbited around it, ships of every shape and size. From vessels as small as the Horizon, now 2 massive warships that could have swallowed the Earth's moon. Daniel stood at the main view screen and stared. He had prepared himself for many things, but not for this. Not for the sheer scale of what humanity was facing. The communication console beeped. Amy looked at Daniel with fear in her eyes. "We are being hailed, sir." Daniel straightened his jacket and tried to look confident. "Put them through." The screen flickered, and Daniel saw his first alien. It was tall and thin, with a body like an insect, and eyes that seemed to be made of 1,000 tiny lenses. When it spoke, its voice clicked and buzzed in a way that made Daniel's skin crawl. "Human vessel. You will dock at Bay 47. You will be escorted to the council chamber. You will speak only when addressed. Do you understand these instructions?" Daniel kept his face calm. "We understand." The alien's mouth parts moved in what might have been a smile. "Good. The council is eager to assess the newest species to crawl out of the darkness." The transmission ended before Daniel could respond. Amy turned to look at him, her face pale. Did that thing just insult us? Hannah Webb stepped forward, her tablet in her hand. The word it used was closer to emerge than crawl, but the implication was definitely negative. They are not treating us as equals, Ambassador. Daniel nodded slowly. He had expected this. Every piece of evidence suggested that the Galactic Council saw itself as superior to everyone else. Humanity was just the latest primitive species to stumble onto the galactic stage. But Daniel had negotiated with arrogant people before. The key was patience. The key was watching and learning and waiting for the right moment to act. "Dock the ship," he ordered. "Let us go meet our hosts." The docking procedure took an hour. The Horizon was guided into a massive bay where dozens of other ships were already parked. Daniel noticed that most of the other vessels were much larger and more advanced than theirs. He noticed the alien crews watching them with expressions that ranged from curiosity to contempt. He noticed everything, and he remembered everything. The escort that met them at the airlock was made up of 4 heavily armored soldiers from a species Daniel did not recognize. They were tall, with forearms and tusks that curved from their lower jaws. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, and they looked at the humans like farmers looking at insects. Daniel smiled politely and said nothing. The walk to the council chamber took them through corridors filled with wonders. Floating displays showed news from distant worlds. Aliens of every description walked past, some on legs, some on tentacles, some floating in anti-gravity bubbles. The air smelled strange, like ozone and something sweeter that Daniel could not identify. Hannah walked beside him, recording everything with her tablet. "There are at least 30 different species visible," she whispered. "Maybe more." "This is incredible, Ambassador." "'Tis," Daniel agreed. "It is also a message. They want us to see how big they are, how powerful, how insignificant we are in comparison." Hannah's excitement faded. "You think this is a show of force?" "I think everything about this is calculated to make us feel small." Daniel kept walking, his eyes forward. "The question is why? What do they want from us that requires this much intimidation?" He would find out soon enough. The doors to the council chamber were just ahead. Massive slabs of metal covered in symbols from 100 different languages. Above the door, carved in letters 10 feet tall, was a phrase that Hannah translated for him. "Here the galaxy speaks with one voice." Daniel took a deep breath and walked through the doors. On Earth. Admiral Kevin Morris was watching through the Horizon's cameras. He saw what Daniel saw. He felt the same sense of being small and helpless in the face of something vast and ancient. But Kevin had been small and helpless before. He had been outnumbered and outgunned in 3 different wars. He had learned that size and power were not everything. He turned to his aide and spoke quietly. "Double the budget for the lunar shipyards, and start construction on the new asteroid facilities. Whatever happens in there, we need to be ready." The aide nodded and hurried away. Kevin turned back to the screen, watching as Daniel disappeared into the council chamber. He did not know what the aliens wanted. He did not know what they would demand. But he knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, they would fight. They just needed time to build the weapons. The council chamber was the largest Daniel Cruz had ever seen. It stretched upward for what seemed like miles, a vast amphitheater carved from crystal that glowed with soft inner light. Thousands of seats filled the tiered walls, and every seat held an alien. Thousands of eyes, some with pupils and some without, all stared down at the small group of humans standing in the central pit. Daniel felt like an ant at the bottom of a well. The 4 security officers stood behind him, their hands empty because they had been forced to surrender their weapons at the door. Hannah Webb was at his side, her tablet hidden in her sleeve, still recording. Her face was calm, but Daniel could see her hands trembling. Above them, on a raised platform that seemed to float in the air, sat 7 figures. The High Council. The rulers of the galaxy. Daniel recognized the Velthari representative from their earlier communication. Her body was long and snake-like, covered in scales that shimmered between blue and green. She coiled around her hovering throne like a serpent preparing to strike. Beside her sat a Crothian, the same species as their armed escorts. This one was even larger than the soldiers, with 4 massive arms and tusks that had been decorated with gold and jewels. His eyes were small and cruel. He looked at the humans with open disgust. The other 5 council members represented species Daniel had never seen before. One was made of living crystal. Another seemed to be a cloud of gas contained in a humanoid-shaped force field. The diversity was staggering, and Daniel understood immediately that this was also part of the message. The galaxy was vast and ancient and strange, and humanity was nothing special. The Velthari spoke first. Her voice echoed through the chamber, translated by devices that Daniel could not see. Humans, you have been brought before this council to be evaluated. Your species has achieved basic interstellar capability. This is notable. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Clicking, hissing, bubbling sounds from 1,000 different throats. Daniel kept his face perfectly still. The Crothian leaned forward, his throne creaking under his weight. Notable in the way a baby taking its first steps is notable. Amusing to watch, but nothing more. More laughter. Louder this time. Daniel felt Hannah tense beside him. He placed a gentle hand on her arm, warning her to stay calm. The Velthari continued, her voice dripping with condescension. Your planet has been assessed. Your resources have been cataloged. Your military capabilities have been analyzed. She paused, and something like a smile crossed her serpentine face. You have no military capabilities worth mentioning? The chamber exploded with laughter. Aliens howled and shrieked and made sounds that Daniel could not identify. Some pointed at the humans with tentacles or claws or appendages that had no name in any human language. The mockery was absolute. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing Earth and its surrounding space. Red markers indicated humanity's orbital stations, the lunar base, the small colony on Mars. Numbers scrolled beside each marker, showing troop counts and weapons capabilities. The Crothian read the numbers aloud, his voice booming with contempt. 17 orbital platforms for deep space vessels, nuclear propulsion, projectile weapons. He snorted, a sound like a boulder rolling down a hill. The Crothian Empire had more impressive forces before we discovered how to make fire. The laughter continued for a long time. Daniel waited. He had learned long ago that the best response to mockery was silence. Let them laugh. Let them feel superior. While they were laughing, they were not paying attention. Finally, the noise began to fade. The Velthari raised one appendage, and the chamber fell silent. You may speak now, human. We could use more entertainment. Daniel stepped forward. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Thank you for the opportunity to address this council, he said, his voice calm and measured. I noticed that you have analyzed our military capabilities. Very thorough. I assume you have also analyzed our history. The chamber grew slightly quieter. Some of the aliens stopped smiling. Your history is irrelevant, snapped the crystal being from the upper tiers. Its voice sounded like glass breaking. You have spent your existence fighting among yourselves over patches of dirt. You were children playing with sharp sticks. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Yes, that is accurate. We have spent our existence fighting. For 10,000 years, across every continent, in every environment our world offers. We have fought in deserts and jungles and mountains and oceans and cities and fields. We have fought with sticks and stones, with swords and spears, with guns and bombs, with chemicals and atoms. He paused, looking up at the council members one by one. You mock us for our primitive weapons. But you should understand something about humanity. We are very, very good at war. We have had a lot of practice. The Crothian laughed, but the sound was forced. Are you threatening this council, little human? You dare to threaten us? Not at all, Daniel said smoothly. I am simply providing context. You have seen what we currently have. You have not seen what we are building. The Velthari's eyes narrowed. And what are you building, little human? Daniel smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You will find out. When we are ready for you to know, The chamber fell completely silent. For the first time since the humans had entered, nobody was laughing. The Velthury recovered first. She straightened on her throne and looked down at Daniel with cold eyes. Your arrogance is noted, human, but arrogance without power is simply foolishness. She gestured, and a data tablet floated down from the platform to hover in front of Daniel. These are the Council's terms for humanity's integration into galactic civilization. Daniel took the tablet and began to read. His expression did not change, but inside, his stomach was turning to ice. The terms were not integration. They were surrender. Complete disarmament. Economic tribute equal to 40% of Earth's production. Military access to the solar system. The right to station Council forces on Earth itself. It was slavery in everything but name. You have 1 Earth year to accept these terms, the Velthury continued. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. The Council has crushed many rebellions, human. You will not be the first, and you will not be the last. Daniel looked at the tablet for a long moment. Then he looked up at the Council and bowed his head politely. I will take these terms back to Earth for consideration. Thank you for your time, the Crothian snorted. Consideration. As if you have a choice. Daniel said nothing. He turned and walked toward the exit, his team following close behind. The aliens in the tiered seats watched them go, some still laughing, some whispering to each other. None of them noticed the look in Daniel's eyes. None of them saw the cold calculation behind his polite smile. Amy Shaw was waiting for them at the horizon. Her face was pale, and she practically dragged them onto the ship. Ambassador, the things they said in there, the way they treated you, how can you be so calm? Daniel waited until the airlock was sealed before he answered. Then he turned to face his team, and they saw that he was not calm at all. His eyes were burning with quiet fury. They made a mistake, he said softly. They think because we are young and small, we are weak. They think because we fight among ourselves, we cannot unite against a common enemy. They think they know what humanity is capable of. He pulled out the data tablet and looked at the impossible demands. They have no idea. Hannah stepped forward. What do we do now? Daniel handed her the tablet. We go home. We show this to Admiral Maurice. And then we start building. He looked out the viewport at Nexus Prime, shrinking as the horizon pulled away. They gave us 1 year. We are going to need every second of it. On Earth, Kevin Morris was already moving. He had watched the entire council session through the Horizon's cameras. He had seen the mockery, heard the threats, read the demands. Now he knew what humanity was facing. And now he could plan. He picked up his phone and made a call to the commanders of every secret facility in the solar system. Begin Phase 2, he said. We are going to war. 3 years passed like a heartbeat. On the surface, life on Earth continued as it always had. People went to work and came home. Children went to school. Families ate dinner together and watched television and argued about politics. Most people tried not to think about the alien ultimatum hanging over their heads like a sword. But beneath the surface, humanity was transforming. Admiral Kevin Morris stood on the observation deck of Shipyard Alpha. Hidden deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, before him floated the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, the Dreadnought Defiance. She was 2 kilometers long. A mountain of metal and weapons wrapped in armor thick enough to stop a nuclear blast. Railguns lined her sides, each one capable of firing tungsten slugs at speeds that made missiles look like thrown rocks. Energy weapons clustered around her command tower. Weapons that humanity had built by studying the alien scout ship that had visited Earth. Years ago, at her heart was an engine that bent space itself, allowing her to cross light years in hours instead of centuries. Captain Nathan Cole stood beside the Admiral, looking at the ship that would be his to command. Nathan was 53 years old, with gray hair and scars from 3 different Earth wars. He had killed men with his bare hands and led soldiers into battles where survival was measured in percentages. Now, he would lead humanity into a war that would determine their survival as a species. She is beautiful, Nathan said quietly. She is necessary, Kevin replied. The council gave us their deadline. 6 months to accept their terms or face consequences. He turned to face Nathan, his eyes hard. "We are not going to accept their terms." Nathan nodded slowly. "In the fleet status?" Kevin smiled, and there was no warmth in it. 12 dreadnoughts, 48 cruisers, 200 destroyers, 5 carrier groups with over 1,000 fighters and bombers. He gestured at the vast construction facility around them. "We have been building in every hidden corner of the solar system. The Council's scouts see what we want them to see, a primitive species scrambling to meet their demands. They do not see this." For 3 years, humanity had played a careful game. Ambassador Daniel Cruz traveled to Nexus Prime regularly, always appearing properly humble, always begging for extensions and clarifications. He played the role of the desperate diplomat perfectly, and the Council believed every word. Why would they not believe? They had seen humanity's military forces. They knew Earth's technology. They had no reason to think the little primitives could hide anything from them, but humanity had learned some important lessons from their history. They had learned how to deceive, how to misdirect, how to prepare for war while talking about peace. Dr. Hannah Webb led a team of analysts who studied every species in the Council. They learned their languages, their customs, their histories. They found the cracks in the Galactic Alliance, the old grudges and bitter rivalries that simmered beneath the surface. "The Crothians hate the Velthari," Hannah reported during a strategy meeting. "They have been rivals for 2,000 years. The only thing keeping them together is the power they gain from controlling the Council." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "What about the smaller species?" Terrified. "Most of them joined the Council because they had no choice. If they saw the big powers weakened, many of them would switch sides in a heartbeat. Then we need to weaken the big powers." Kevin pulled up a holographic map of the galaxy, showed them that the Council is not as strong as it pretends to be. The training programs were brutal. Every ship's crew drilled constantly, running battle. Simulations against enemies with superior numbers and technology. They learned tactics that the Council had never seen. Tactics developed by species that had spent millennia fighting each other. Captain Lisa ground commanded the cruiser Resolve. She had been a fighter pilot before the aliens came, one of the best in the world. Now she pushed her crew to the breaking point and beyond. "The Council thinks we are primitive," she told them during one particularly harsh exercise. "They think we will fold at the first sign of resistance. They think war is something that happens between civilized people with rules and rituals." She smiled coldly. "We are going to teach them what war really looks like. Secret facilities across Earth and its colonies. Scientists worked on weapons that had never been imagined before." Dr. Peter Shaw led the weapons development team. A group of engineers and physicists who had been given unlimited resources and a single goal: find ways to kill aliens. They succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The quantum disruptors could scramble enemy targeting systems, making their weapons useless. The stealth plating could make ships nearly invisible to sensors. The boarding pods could punch through alien hulls and deliver Marines directly into enemy vessels, turning space battles into the close-quarters combat that humans excelled at. "The thing about humanity," Peter explained to his team, "is that we have spent our entire existence finding new ways to kill each other. Every war, every conflict, every blood feud has taught us something. Now we get to apply all that knowledge to a bigger problem." 6 months before the Council's deadline, Admiral Morris called a meeting of his senior commanders. They gathered in a secure bunker on the moon, surrounded by screens showing the disposition of humanity's secret fleet. "They expect us to surrender," Kevin said, looking around the room at the men and women who would lead Earth's first interstellar war. "They expect us to grovel and beg for mercy. They have no idea what is coming." He activated a holographic display showing the known positions of Council forces. "Intelligence suggests they will send a compliance fleet when we miss the deadline. Probably 300 to 400 ships, mostly Crothian and Velthari. They expect to arrive, crush any resistance, and have Earth under control within a week." Captain Nathan Cole studied the display. "In our response, we let them come. We'll let them enter the solar system. We let them think they have already won." Kevin's smile was predatory. "And then we show them the fleet they did not know existed." Lisa Grant leaned forward. "What about after?" Even if we win the first battle, the Council has thousands of ships. We cannot fight the entire galaxy. We will not have to. Kevin changed the display to show political maps of the Council's territory. The Council is not as unified as it appears. The smaller species are only loyal because they fear the big powers. If we can defeat the Crothians and Velthari decisively, if we can show the galaxy that the Council can bleed, others will join us. Hannah Webb nodded slowly. Divide and conquer. Use their own fractures against them. Exactly. Kevin looked around the room one more time. We have 6 months. 6 months to finish our preparations, to drill our crews, to make sure everything is perfect. When the Council fleet arrives, we need to be ready to give them the worst surprise of their lives. Nathan Cole stood up, and the other commanders stood with him. We will be ready, Nathan promised. When those aliens come to take our world, they will find out what humanity is really capable of. The meeting ended, and the commanders scattered back to their posts. Ships continued to roll off the production lines. Crews continued to train. Weapons continued to be tested and refined. On the surface, humanity played the role of the frightened primitive, begging for more time, promising to consider the Council's demands. Ambassador Daniel Cruz traveled too. Nexus Prime again and again, each time looking more desperate, each time buying a few more precious weeks. And in the darkness between planets, hidden in asteroid fields and behind moons, humanity's warships waited, patient, silent, ready. The galaxy had mocked them. The Council had threatened them. The great powers had dismissed them as children playing with toys. They had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Kevin Morris stood alone on the observation deck late at night, looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Council fleet was being assembled. Somewhere out there, admirals were laughing about the easy victory they expected. You think we are weak? Kevin whispered to the darkness. Oh, you think we will break. But you do not understand what we are. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the species that never, ever gives up. He clenched his fists. Come and take our world if you can. We will be waiting. The deadline was almost here. The war was about to begin. The Council's deadline came and went. Earth sent no message of surrender. No acceptance of terms. Just silence. As expected, the Galactic Council dispatched a compliance fleet to bring the upstart species to heel. 300 warships jumped into the outer solar system. Their arrival marked by a burst of light that sensors across Earth detected immediately. Supreme Admiral Vexener commanded the fleet from his massive flagship, the Crusher of Worlds. He was a Crothian warlord who had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of conquest. 17 rebellions had ended under his command. 17 species had learned the price of defying the Council. He expected humans to be the 18th. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes was on duty at the Mars monitoring station when the first alarm started screaming. She looked at her screens, counted the incoming ships, and felt her blood run cold. Contact, she reported, her voice steady despite the fear. 300+ vessels, mixed Crothian and Velthari configuration. They are heading for Earth at standard approach speed. The message reached Admiral Kevin Morris within seconds. He was already on the bridge of the Defiance, hidden in the asteroid belt with the rest of humanity's secret fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Morris. Execute Operation Sunrise. He paused, looking around at his crew. It is time. The Council. Fleet moved through the outer solar system with casual arrogance. They passed Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn, meeting no resistance. Their sensors showed the human fleet exactly where they expected it to be. A pitiful collection of 16 primitive warships orbiting Earth, preparing to die. Supreme Admiral. Vexener sat on his command throne, already composing the victory report he would send to Nexus Prime. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. A species so primitive they still used projectile weapons. A species so foolish they had refused the generous terms the Council had offered. Pathetic, he rumbled to his aide. They have not even attempted to mount a proper defense. Open a channel to the human homeworld. I want to accept their surrender personally. The channel opened. But the face that appeared on screen was not a trembling diplomat. It was Admiral Kevin Morris, standing on a bridge that Thexener did not recognize, wearing a uniform the Crothion had never seen before. "Supreme Admiral Thexener," Kevin said calmly. "I am afraid there has been a misunderstanding. We are not here to surrender." The Sooner's forearms tightened on his armrests. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. "Insolence," he growled. "You have no ships, human, no weapons." "You cannot possibly hope to, actually," Kevin interrupted. "We have plenty of ships." All around the Council fleet, space itself seemed to tear open. From the asteroid belt, from behind Jupiter's moons, from hidden positions throughout the outer solar system, humanity's warships appeared. 12 dreadnoughts, each one 2 kilometers of armored fury. 48 cruisers bristling with weapons. 200 destroyers, fast and deadly. 5 carrier groups launching hundreds of fighters and bombers into the darkness. The Defiance led them, her running lights blazing to life as she took position directly in front of the Council fleet. For the first time in 200 years, Supreme Admiral Thexener felt fear. "You mocked us," Kevin continued, his voice carrying across every frequency. "You called us children. You demanded our submission. You threatened our world." He leaned forward, and his eyes were cold as the void between stars. "Now you will learn what humanity does to those who threaten our home." Thexener recovered quickly. He had not survived 17 rebellions by panicking. "You are still outnumbered, human. Your primitive fleet cannot stand against Council technology. All ships, attack formation. Destroy them all." The Battle of Seoul began. Captain Nathan Cole sat in the command chair of the Defiance, watching the enemy fleet reorganize. Around him, his crew moved with quiet efficiency, each person focused on their assigned task. "All batteries target the flagship," Nathan ordered. "Show them what human weapons can do." The Defiance's main guns spoke. 12 railgun slugs, each one the size of a small car, accelerated to a fraction of light speed in the span of a heartbeat. They crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds, slamming into the Crusher of Worlds with enough force to shatter a small moon. The Crothian flagship's shields held barely. Alarms screamed throughout the massive ship as systems overloaded and backup generators struggled to compensate. Thexener stared at his damage reports in disbelief. One volley from a primitive human ship had nearly collapsed his shields. "Impossible," he whispered, but it was not impossible. It was just beginning. The human fleet surged forward, moving in patterns that the Council had never seen before. Instead of forming neat lines and exchanging fire at long range, they darted and weaved, using asteroids and debris as cover. They attacked from multiple angles at once, overwhelming point defense systems that were designed for more conventional warfare. Captain Lisa Grant brought the Resolve into a formation of Velthree cruisers, her ship twisting through their fire like a dancer avoiding clumsy partners. The Velthree tried to track her, but human ships were faster, more maneuverable than anything they had faced before. "Launch boarding pods," Lisa commanded. Dozens of armored cylinders shot from the Resolve's hull, punching through weakened shields and alien armor. Inside each pod were human Marines, soldiers who had trained for years in zero-gravity combat. The Velthari had no answer for warriors who fought with the ferocity of cornered wolves. Within minutes, 3 cruisers had been captured from the inside. The battle raged for hours. Ships died on both sides, blooming into flowers of fire and debris. Human destroyers swarmed around the larger Council vessels, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. Human fighters engaged enemy craft in dogfights that lit up the darkness like a deadly fireworks display. But slowly, inexorably, the Council fleet began to crumble. Their formations broke as human ships darted through gaps in their lines. Their communications became chaos as quantum disruptors scrambled their frequencies. Their morale collapsed as ship after ship fell to an enemy they had dismissed as primitive children. On the bridge of the crippled Crusher of Worlds, Supreme Admiral Thexener watched his fleet die. Half his ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest were fighting desperately just to survive. "This cannot be happening," he said, his voice hollow. "They were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to be easy. His aide, bleeding from a wound on his head, struggled to his feet. "Admiral, we must retreat. If we stay, we will lose everything." Vexener stared at the tactical display, at the red icons that showed dead or dying ships, at the blue icons that showed human vessels moving through his fleet like predators through a herd of prey. A transmission came through on his personal channel. Admiral Kevin Morris, his face streaked with sweat and smoke, but his eyes burning with triumph. "Supreme Admiral, I suggest you withdraw. Take what is left of your fleet and return to the Council. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity is not to be trifled with." Kevin paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was ice. "And tell them this is only the beginning." Vexener had no choice. He gave the order to retreat. The remnants of the Council fleet turned and ran, limping toward the nearest warp point with human ships watching their every move. No pursuit, no harassment. Just silent observation, a message, a warning, a promise. As the last enemy ship disappeared into warp space, the human fleet held formation. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Nathan Cole allowed himself a small smile. "Damage report," he ordered. 14 destroyers lost, his first officer reported. 6 cruisers heavily damaged. The dreadnought Vengeance has lost main power, but is recoverable. Total casualties approximately 4,000. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, honoring the dead. Then he opened them again. "Cover survivors. Begin repairs. And someone get me Admiral Morris?" Kevin's face appeared on the screen, tired but triumphant. "We did it, Captain. We won." Nathan nodded slowly. "We won the first battle. But the war is not over." "No," Kevin agreed. "The war is just beginning. But now they know. Now the whole galaxy knows." He looked out at the stars. At the darkness that held enemies who would soon be coming for revenge. Humanity fights back. The news of the Battle of Sol spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel, had defeated a Council compliance fleet. They had destroyed or captured over 200 warships. They had humiliated the mighty Crothian Empire and sent the survivors running home with their tails between their legs, for species who had lived under the Council's shadow for centuries. It was the most incredible thing they had ever heard. The Council's response was predictable. First denial, then rage, then mobilization for total war. The Veltharian Crothians put aside their ancient rivalry long enough to agree on one thing. Humanity had to be destroyed, but they had made a critical mistake. In the time it took them to organize a proper invasion force, humanity was not sitting idle. Admiral Kevin Morris launched the next phase of their strategy. The carrier groups led by the massive carriers Liberty, Freedom, and Justice struck at Council supply lines and forward bases. They appeared without warning, unleashed devastating attacks, and vanished before enemy reinforcements could arrive. It was the tactics of guerrilla warfare, applied on an interstellar scale. Hit and run. Strike and fade. Never give the enemy a target they could hit back, the Councils carefully maintained. The image of invincibility began to crack. Ambassador Daniel Cruz operated from a forward diplomatic station, working to exploit every division in the Galactic Alliance. He met secretly with representatives of species who had suffered under Council rule, offering him something they had never been offered before: a choice. "We do not want to rule the galaxy," Daniel told them. "We do not want to replace one empire with another. We want peace, on terms that do not require anyone's enslavement. Help us defeat the Crothians and Velthari, and we will help you build something better." Many were skeptical, but many more remembered the Battle of Sol. If humans could defeat a Council fleet, maybe they could defeat the Council itself. One by one, species began to switch sides. The Talaxians, a race of engineers who had been forced to build weapons for the Crothians for generations, quietly began sabotaging their own work. The Merindai telepathic traders who controlled vital supply routes suddenly found that those routes were no longer available to Council ships. The Crixians warriors who had been conquered and conscripted into the Crothian military started disappearing from their posts and reappearing in human territory. The Council's alliance was falling apart from within. 6 months after the first battle, the Council launched its grand offensive. 1,000 ships, drawn from every loyal member species, commanded by the best admirals they could find. Their target was Earth itself. This time, there would be no underestimating the enemy. This time, they would bring overwhelming force. They never reached Earth. Humanity met them at Proxima Centauri, in a battle that would be remembered for 1,000 years. The human fleet had grown since Sol. Ships from allied species now flew alongside human dreadnoughts. Talaxian engineers had improved human weapons. Merendi intelligence had provided detailed information about enemy formations, and humanity itself had learned from the first battle, refining their tactics, improving their armor, pushing their technology to new limits. Captain Nathan Cole commanded the Defiance from her rebuilt bridge, surrounded by a crew that had become family through blood and fire. Beside him in the formation was the resolve Captain Lisa Grant at the helm, and dozens of other ships, commanded by officers who had proven themselves in combat. The Battle of Proxima lasted 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting, of ships dying in droves, of heroism and sacrifice on a scale the galaxy had never witnessed. Human destroyers made suicide runs against enemy dreadnoughts, their crews choosing death over retreat. Allied pilots flew until their fuel ran out and then crashed their fighters into enemy bridges. Marines stormed enemy ships with nothing but rifles and hatred, taking vessel after vessel in brutal close-quarters combat. When it was over, the Council fleet was broken beyond repair. Half their ships were destroyed. Most of the rest were captured. Supreme Admiral Vexener, who had led the fleet in one last desperate attempt to redeem himself, was found dead in his command chair, killed by a human sniper during a boarding action, and humanity kept pushing their fleet. Now, combined with ships from a dozen allied species, swept through Council territory like a storm. World after world was liberated. Species that had been enslaved for centuries saw their chains broken. The Crothian Empire, which had ruled through fear for 2,000 years, crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. 1 year after the Council's deadline for humanity's surrender, a human fleet arrived at Nexus Prime, not to conquer. That had never been the goal, but to end the war once and for all. The Council chamber looked different now. The tiered seating was more than half empty, many species having withdrawn their membership or switched allegiances. The High Council's floating platform held only 3 of its original 7 members. The others had been executed by their own people or had fled into hiding. Admiral Kevin Morris stood in the central pit where Ambassador Danya Cruz had stood 4 years earlier. But this time, he was not alone. Behind him stood representatives of 30 species that had joined humanity's cause. "We could destroy this station," Kevin said, his voice calm and cold. "We could burn every world that ever supported your council. We have the power now." The remaining council members said nothing. The Velthari representative, a young female who had inherited the position after her predecessor was killed in the fighting, could not meet his eyes. "But that is not who we are," Kevin continued. "We did not fight this war to become like you. We fought for the right to exist on our own terms, to explore, to grow, to reach for the stars without asking permission from anyone." He stepped forward, and the council members flinched back despite themselves. "You mocked us because we were young. You called us primitive because our technology was different from yours. You thought because we fought among ourselves we were weak?" Kevin smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "You forgot that the species that survives conflict becomes stronger. You forgot that the species that knows how to fight will never stop fighting until it wins. You forgot that youth means potential, and primitive means adaptable, and different is what makes us dangerous." He placed a data chip on the platform before the council. "These are our terms. A mutual defense treaty with the species that fought beside us. Free trade between all worlds. Recognition of every species' right to govern themselves. No demands of tribute. No threats of compliance. No council ruling over everyone else like emperors." He stepped back. "Accept these terms, and we can begin building a galaxy where no species lives in fear of another. Reject them, and we continue this war until there is nothing left to fight over. The Velthary representative reached out with a trembling appendage and took the data chip. "We will accept," she said quietly. "We have no choice." "You always had a choice," Kevin replied. "You just made the wrong one for 2,000 years. Now you get to make a different choice. I suggest you make it wisely." He turned and walked out of the council chamber, his allies following behind him. The doors closed on the empty room, on the broken dreams of empire. On the end of an era, 1 year later, the Treaty of Nexus was signed. The old council was dissolved. In its place rose a new alliance, built on mutual respect rather than fear, on cooperation rather than conquest. Humanity took its place among the stars, not as servants or subjects, but as equals. Partners in a galaxy that had finally learned an important lesson. Never mock humanity. Never threaten humanity. Never assume that because they are young and strange and different, they can be conquered. Because when human warships arrive, they mean business. And they always finish what they start. Dr. Hannah Webb stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station above Nexus Prime, watching ships from 100 species come and go. Beside her stood Ambassador Daniel Cruz, older now, with gray in his hair and lines on his face. Hannah asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Nothing lasts forever. But this is a good start. We showed the galaxy what we are capable of when threatened. Now we get to show them what we are capable of when we work together." He looked out at the stars, at the vast universe that was now open to humanity. The galaxy mocked us. Then our warships arrived. Now they respect us. He chuckled softly. "I think that is a pretty good outcome for a species that was playing with sharp sticks a few thousand years ago," Hannah laughed. "Do you think we will ever stop surprising them?" Daniel shook his head. "Not a chance. That is what makes us human." Below them, the first human civilian transport docked at Nexus Prime, carrying tourists and traders and dreamers eager to explore the galaxy their warriors had opened. The war was over, but humanity's story was just beginning, and somewhere among the stars, a child looked up at the sky and dreamed of adventures yet to come.